All right, so today we are diving deep into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh yeah, this one's a classic.
It really is. It's been what, like 20 years since this book came out, and people are still talking about it.
Still so relevant.
It really is. And it's one of those books that, some people love it, some people have their criticisms, but no matter what, it definitely gets you thinking about money differently.
Definitely. And that's what we're here to do, right? Like, let's unpack the core lessons, those big aha moments, and really see how they apply to, your life and your financial journey.
Exactly. So let's jump right in. One of the most famous lines from the book is, "The rich don't work for money."
Right. Such a bold statement.
It really is. I remember the first time I read that, I was like, wait, what are you talking about? But then Kiyosaki goes on to explain.
He does. And that's where the whole idea of his two dads comes in, right?
Yeah.
You've got his educated dad, who represents that more traditional path of you go to school, you get a good job, you work hard, you save money.
Right. The classic advice.
Exactly. But then you have his rich dad,
Mm-hmm.
who kind of throws that all out the window.
Turns it on its head.
Totally. He's all about building assets, not just working for a paycheck.
And that's where his famous assets versus liabilities concept comes in. And I have to admit, this was huge for me. I think a lot of us grow up with this idea that, buying a house is an asset.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then Kiyosaki's like, hold on a second.
He really challenges that thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like an aha moment for so many people. He makes it so simple. Assets, put money in your pocket. Liabilities, take money out of your pocket.
So simple, but so powerful.
Right. So that house that you're paying a mortgage on and property taxes and all the maintenance, it's actually a liability unless it's generating income for you, like if you're renting it out.
And he applies that same logic to cars, vacations, clothes. If it's not making you money, it's probably costing you money.
And this is where we get to the rat race idea.
Oh, yeah, that feeling of running and getting nowhere.
Exactly. You're stuck in that cycle of working to earn and then spending just to keep up.
And a lot of it is driven by fear, right? Fear of not being able to pay your bills or losing your job or missing out.
Absolutely. And that fear can be so paralyzing. It keeps people from taking risks, from investing in themselves, from really building that financial freedom they dream of.
And Kiyosaki argues that financial education is the key to breaking free from that cycle.
It's not just about making money. It's about understanding how money works.
Yeah, it's almost like money has its own set of rules.
It does. And once you understand those rules, you can start to play the game differently. Kiyosaki is a big believer that knowledge is power when it comes to your finances.
Absolutely. And he shares some pretty interesting stories about his own financial education, like that one where his rich dad makes him work for 10 cents an hour.
Right.
I mean, who would do that? But there's actually a brilliant lesson in there.
Totally. It's about the value of learning over just earning.
So we're starting to see the foundation of Kiyosaki's philosophy. But how do we actually start building that financial freedom he talks about?
Well, one of his core principles is minding your own business. And he doesn't necessarily mean starting a company. It's more about focusing on building your own asset column.
So that could be things like real estate stocks, maybe even starting a side hustle.
Exactly. It's about creating income that's not tied to your time. Remember, it's not about how much money you make. It's about how hard that money works for you.
And that brings us right back to assets versus liabilities.
Right.
Because a business that's losing money isn't exactly an asset, is it?
Not quite.
Yeah.
It's about making smart investments, things that put money in your pocket without draining your resources. And that's where understanding financial statements and cash flow becomes so important.
So it's not just about earning more, it's about making your money work smarter.
Exactly. And recognizing those hidden opportunities that are out there.
Okay, speaking of hidden opportunities, I have to ask about this whole concept of corporations. This was a huge aha for me when I first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It's definitely a key part of his philosophy.
Because he's basically saying that the wealthy use corporations to build and protect their wealth in ways that most people don't even realize are possible.
And this is where things can get a little controversial.
Right, because he even says the rich don't play by the same rules as everyone else.
Yeah, and that can rub some people the wrong way.
For sure. But I don't think he's saying that the wealthy are above the law or anything like that.
No, his point is that they understand the rules of the game differently, and they use those rules to their advantage.
It's like they're playing a different game altogether.
In a way they are, and Kiyosaki wants everyone to have access to that game.
So it's not about cheating the system. It's about understanding how the system works and using it legally to your benefit.
Exactly. And this is where financial education becomes so crucial. It's about leveling the playing field. It's like learning the secret language of wealth building.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest advantages he talks about is how corporations can deduct business expenses.
Right. It's like writing off your travel meals, even your car if it's for business.
Exactly. Things you'd be spending money on anyway, but now you're getting a tax break.
And that frees up even more money to reinvest back into your assets or your business.
That's a powerful cycle.
Now, I know what some people might be thinking. Setting up a corporation sounds complicated, expensive, maybe even a little bit intimidating.
Sure, but Kiyosaki would probably call that an "I don't want" holding you back.
Definitely. He'd say, don't let fear or lack of knowledge keep you from exploring something that could really change your financial life.
And the truth is, it's easier than ever to incorporate these days. The benefits far outweigh the hurdles.
So it's about educating yourself, doing your research, and not being afraid to ask for help.
Absolutely. And it's not just about corporations either. It's about always being willing to learn and adapt. The financial world is constantly changing. You got to stay curious.
Speaking of learning and adapting, one story that really stuck with me from Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the one about the richest men of 1923.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerful one.
It really shows how wealth without financial intelligence can disappear so quickly.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
For those who haven't read the book, Kiyosaki talks about how many of the richest men from that era ended up losing everything in the Great Depression.
And it wasn't just about the stock market crashing either. It was about their mindset, their lack of diversification, their inability to adapt when things changed.
They were playing by the old rules.
Exactly. And the rules of the game had changed.
It's a good reminder that true wealth isn't about how much money you have in this moment. It's about your financial knowledge, your ability to manage risk, and your long-term vision.
It's about building something that lasts.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the big picture of wealth building, but let's get practical for a minute. What are some of the concrete steps people can take? Because Kiyosaki does offer a lot of actionable advice.
He does. And it's not all about complicated investments or anything like that. He talks a lot about developing good financial habits.
The basics.
Exactly. Things like tracking your expenses, living below your means, paying yourself first.
That pay yourself first concept is so important. It's so easy to fall into the trap of paying everyone else first.
Right.
Your rent, your credit card bills.
It's like you're putting yourself last.
Exactly.
And Kiyosaki would say that you need to treat your asset column like your most important creditor. Even if it's just a small amount at first, put that money towards your investments or savings before you pay for anything else.
So it's about changing your mindset.
Exactly. You're prioritizing your future self.
He also talks about overcoming those I don't wants. Remember those?
Oh yeah, those pesky I don't wants.
Yeah.
He sees them as roadblocks.
And sometimes it's not even about doing something huge like starting a business. It could be as simple as facing your fear of understanding your own finances.
Right, like creating a budget. A lot of people get intimidated by that.
It can feel overwhelming.
Kiyosaki would say that's just your fear talking.
And he'd probably suggest finding a mentor or a financial advisor to help you through that.
Oh, for sure. He's all about surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you, people who can guide you and support you.
And it's not just about financial mentors either.
Right.
He also talks about learning from books, courses, seminars.
Anything that can help you grow and challenge your assumptions.
Become a student of finance.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey.
And don't forget about taking action, because Kiyosaki's a big believer in taking action.
He is. He says, you don't learn to walk by following the rules. You learn by doing and by falling over.
It's about taking that first step, even if you're not sure where you're going to land.
And being willing to learn from your mistakes.
You know, one of the criticisms I've heard about Rich Dad, Poor Dad is that it's too focused on making money, that it doesn't talk enough about giving back or making a difference in the world.
Interesting.
But I actually think that's a misinterpretation of his message.
How so?
Because I think Kiyosaki believes that financial freedom gives you the platform to make a bigger impact.
Right.
When you're not constantly worried about money, you have the time and the resources to focus on things that are important to you.
That makes sense. Whether it's donating to charity or starting your own foundation or just having more time to spend with your family, financial freedom gives you options.
Exactly. It's not just about accumulating wealth. It's about living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
And that often requires having financial security.
Absolutely. Speaking of fulfillment, Kiyosaki also talks about the importance of finding your passion, doing work that you love.
He's a big believer in that. He says, work should be fun.
Now, I know that might sound a little too good to be true for some people.
Right. Like work is supposed to be a drag.
Exactly. But think about it. Haven't you ever had those moments where you were so absorbed in something you were doing that you completely lost track of time?
Oh, for sure. I think we all have.
Longster.
That's flow state, right?
Exactly. And that's what it's like when you're truly passionate about what you're doing. It doesn't feel like work. It's energizing. It's fulfilling. It doesn't drain you the way a job you hate might.
And that kind of energy and enthusiasm often leads to greater success.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most inspiring messages in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's a reminder that you have the power to create a life you love, a life that's aligned with your values and your passions.
You don't have to settle.
You don't. And sometimes that means taking risks, stepping outside of your comfort zone, challenging the way you've always done things. Just like Kiyosaki did when he left his secure job to pursue his own path.
It's about having the courage to bet on yourself.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground, but let's circle back to something we touched on earlier. The idea that the rich don't play by the same rules. I know that statement can rub some people the wrong way, but I think it's important to understand what Kiyosaki is really getting at.
It's definitely a provocative statement.
It is, but he's not saying that wealthy people are above the law or that they're doing anything unethical.
Right.
What he's saying is that they understand the rules of the game differently, and they use those rules to their advantage.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's like playing Monopoly. If you don't understand the rules, you're going to lose. But if you study the rules, you can develop strategies to win.
It's about understanding the system.
Exactly. And Kiyosaki wants everyone to have the opportunity to win, not just those who were born into wealth or privilege.
He wants to level the playing field.
And he believes that financial education is the key.
Knowledge is power.
Now, I know we're getting close to the end of our deep dive here, but there's one more story from the book that I wanted to touch on. The story about the comic book library.
Oh, yeah. That one brings back memories.
For those who haven't read it, Kiyosaki and his friend Mike, they started a comic book library in their basement when they were kids.
Talk about entrepreneurial spirit.
Right, and they were making money too.
Yeah.
Until Mike's dad shut it down.
Spoiling the fun.
But even though it was short-lived, that experience taught them so much about business cash flow and finding creative solutions.
Such a great example of how you don't need a lot of money or experience to start something.
Just an idea and some hustle. You know, it's funny, thinking of that story, it reminds me of something else Kiyosaki talks about, the power of saying yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like saying yes to opportunities, even if they seem small or unconventional, because you never know where they might lead.
It's about being open to new possibilities, right? Not letting fear hold you back.
Exactly. He even talks about how he took a second job, not just for the extra money, but for the learning experience.
It's all about finding those hidden opportunities.
He really is. Like, he talks about joining the Marine Corps to learn about leadership, even though it meant leaving a secure job.
Wow. That's commitment.
Right. It shows that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places.
Definitely not the traditional career path.
So we've talked about financial education, building your asset column, overcoming those I don't wants, but I think there's one more piece of the puzzle that's so important, finding your passion.
Ah, yes, passion. That's huge.
Because Kiyosaki believes that when you're passionate about what you do, it doesn't feel like work.
It's funny how that works, right? When you love what you do, it just doesn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. He even says that work should be fun. And while that might sound a little idealistic, I think there's a lot of truth to it. Think about it. Haven't you ever been so engrossed in something you were doing that time just flew by?
Oh, absolutely. You get into that flow state and you're just completely in the zone.
And that's the power of aligning your work with your passions. And when you're financially secure, you have the freedom to pursue those passions without being limited by money.
Exactly. It's about having the freedom to design your own life.
And that brings us back to Kiyosaki's definition of wealth, which I absolutely love. He says that true wealth isn't about how much money you have, but about how long you could survive financially if you stopped working today.
Ooh, that's a good one. It really shifts your perspective, doesn't
It
it?
really does. It's not about material possessions or status symbols. It's about having the freedom and security to live life on your own terms.
Having options.
Exactly. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's like he's offering a roadmap for getting there.
It's a blueprint for creating a life of abundance, both financially and personally.
I love that. Well, we've covered so much ground today, but I think if there's one thing I want listeners to take away from this deep dive, it's that financial freedom is not just a dream.
It's a possibility.
Exactly. It's a possibility for anyone who's willing to put in the effort, challenge their assumptions, and take action.
Take that first step.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a call to action. It's a reminder that you have the power to create the life you want, but you have to be willing to step up and make it happen. So as you go about your week, think about this. What's one principle from the book that you can start applying to your life today? What's one small step you can take towards building your own path to financial freedom? Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those aha moments coming.